Hello and welcome to another ship review. Today we will talk about Navy Coercer. This ship is a weird mix between Dragoon and Tech 1 Coercer. I find design of this ship not elegant. CCP kind of slapped 600 bonuses on it and made them pretty weak, and these bonuses don't really synergize with each other. This ship in general works. You will see what I mean when we will start talking about the bonuses, archetypes, and so on. The next slide. Here just an overview of solo PvP metagame. So Navy Coercer in terms of popularity is 6th most popular destroyer, and in terms of win rate it's the second strongest Navy destroyer, behind only Navy Catalyst. So this ship works, but let's look at the bonuses first and you will see what I mean. So you get a bonus to damage, activation, cost, optimal range. These three are pretty normal. Fall off, I think it's useless on a laser platform because lasers don't really have fall off anyway, so why would you give bonus to that? And then energy neutralizes strength and activation cost. So this is not like in Dragoon where you get weak newts but very long range newts. Here you get very strong newts but very short range newts. And you get armor hit points. So the second part, energy neutralizer bonuses and armor hit points bonuses, it kind of points towards brawling. But even in a brawler Navy Coercer, it looks a bit weird because lasers naturally cover the entire scrum range, but here you get weapons that cover the scrum range and even much further than that, but you get a very short energy newt. So essentially it forces you into brawling in blaster ranges. It just looks weird. Like, why would you give a ship that excels at different style the bonus that forces it to fight against blasters at 0, for example? And you also get still only 2 medium slots. And note that unlike Tech 1 Coercer, Navy Coercer has no bonus to tracking. And it means that at close range or at brawling archetype, you cannot use beams at all because people will just mitigate your damage because you don't have tracking bonus. So essentially you are forced into brawling with pulses and trying to use energy newt to kind of tip the fights against pure like blaster brawlers in your favor. I found it weird. And now let's look at the first part of his bonuses. So you get optimal range and fall off, and this kind of points towards kiting because you also have only 2 medium slots, and 2 medium slots always naturally point you towards kiting. For kiting you only need macro warp drive and warp disruptor, and everything else is kind of optional because your control is your speed and not your medium slots. But if you go this route, when you don't need bonuses to newts and you don't need bonuses to armor hit points, again, weird design. Like you either use one half of a ship or you use the other half of a ship. And when we talk about performance, again, also keep in mind that this engagement map essentially blends together 2 different ships. A brawling Navy Coercer with newts and kiting Navy Coercer with no tank and no newts. I think one common feature between both of these feats is that they both like to be in position. For brawling Coercer, it's important to apply newts, so it kind of needs to be in position to do this, at least for like a cycle or two. And for kiting Coercer, again, it's crucial because you can't go in a plex out of position. When a brawler sits inside, you just will not be able to get away from the beacon. Overall, of course, you can kill all Tick 1 and Navy destroyers. Against Navy frigates, you need to remember that you will have a fairly soft spot at scrum range, because at scrum range frigates will be able to avoid a lot of your damage by breaking your tracking even if you use pulses, and they will also be able to mitigate your energy neutralizer, because you will not go further really than 7.5 kilometers with that. Against Navy destroyers, this is pretty balanced. There are a lot of nuance there, but in general you can fight all of them as long as you're not directly hard countered. Like, don't go in a kiting Navy Coercer, in a plex occupied by a blaster Navy Catalyst, obviously. But other than that, it generally works fine. Against assault frigates, this ship is quite good because you have newts if you want to brawl, and newts extremely dangerous to frigates. And if you want to kite, again, you have a lot of DPS and you can compete in like straightforward DPS races. As usual, you want to avoid frigates that have Tech 2 resists against your damage, but this would be only Minmatar with EM and thermal resists, and all our frigates should be a fair game. Okay, now let's look at the feats. I will talk about brawling feats first, and then I will cover kiting feats separately. So with the brawling feats, you need to remember two things. First, you cannot use beams because Navy Coercer has no tracking bonus. Any frigate that orbits outside of your Newton range, so 7.5 kilometers, will just break your tracking, and you will not be able to apply significant or sufficient DPS to win fights. So any brawling Navy Coercer always uses pulses. Number two, you need to either have some mobility with micro warp drive, or you need to hit up to 24 kilometers with Scorch. Why? Well, otherwise any kiting frigate will just come in, set orbit 20, and you are dead. There is nothing you can do about it if you cannot hit to 20 kilometers and if you don't have a mobility to compensate for the poor optimal range. So the feats that I will show you, they are made with these two important points in mind. So the first feat, I would say this one is the standard. You get some mobility with micro warp drive, you get a scrum, you get large pulses. They don't hit up to 24 kilometers, but they hit far enough so that with a micro warp drive you're generally able to deal with kiters anyway. Well, unless we have like a strict hard counter with tracking disruptors, in which case you are just dead anyways. But against like most kiters, especially like kiting destroyers, this works fine. You can also feed double newt. This is a bit of off meta. It really is designed to counter blaster brawlers, and in particular ships like Navy Catalyst and Navy Cormorant. This is really only two ships that you are worried about in a brawling Navy Coercer, because they will have better tank to DPS and they will be able to brawl you down if you have only one if you have only one unit. So this is essentially the counter to these two matchups. These matchups are quite popular, but I would say in general you want to have something more universal. And the alternative is to go a stationary platform. So here you drop your macro warp drive and you feed a web. But in this case you have to fit a couple of locust rigs to extend your optimal range. So if I switch into Scorch, you will see that this ship hits up to Warp Disruptor, at the edge of Warp Disruptor range. And again, kiters may be able to control you, but they will still have to do something about the damage that you can apply to them. And in terms of our stats, this is essentially the same feat. You get very similar EHP, you get very similar, I think it's even the same DPS as this feat. So this is up to your preference really. I personally think that Macro Warp Drive just gives you a bit more flexibility when the feat with when a stationary platform. But all of these three works, all of these feats work fine. For kiting feats you have a choice between pulses and beams. Feats are quite similar. I would say pulses are far more popular. This is similar to a situation with Slicer, for example, because pulses are just much easier to fly with better tracking, better cap, easier fitting and so on. Fit is quite straightforward. You just need to fit two optimal range rigs to extend your optimal range up to your Warp Disruptor range. You can fit Tech 2 Warp Disruptor if you downgrade your heatsinks, but in my experience the scoped Warp Disruptor is good enough because you are really not gonna do any damage past like 25 kilometers anyway, and scoped Warp Disruptor covers this entire range. So if you manage the fight correctly, you are not ever should be further than 24-25 kilometers. The beam feed is almost the same. You need two fitting rigs to make it work, and you can fit a tracking disruptor, tracking enhancer in the low slot. You don't need optimal range rigs because you're using beams that naturally have a much longer optimal range. If you compare these two feeds, I would say pulse feeds are better between like 0 and 20, and beam feeds are better at like 20 plus. Overall, with beams you can apply some pressure on your opponents without committing to 20 kilometers, which is a very nice bonus, but at the same time you need to manually pilot usually a little bit to minimize your transversal, because your tracking is really poor, and anything that burns at you with a decent transversal will mitigate a lot of your like paper damage. And now one note about 10mm kite that is quite viable in Tech 1 Coercer. Here it's really rare. It's usable, but I don't think it's that much stronger when on a Tech 1 Coercer. You do get a lot more tank, of course, but everything else is kind of similar, and the fourth medium slot that you get on the Navy Coercer just doesn't really work with this feat. You don't really have anything to fit there, anything like specifically useful, so it's not that popular, but it kind of works, it's just not that great. And I think this is everything as for the Navy Coercer. So as you can see, what I mentioned in the beginning, you get like two completely different ships essentially, one for brawler and one for kiter, but both of them are pretty strong, so you can use whatever you like. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next ship review.